What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website. But for now, if you've been following along at home, we are in a holding pattern until the Guilds of Ravnica stories on October 10th. So we're here reading some and reviewing some Return to Ravnica stories to remind ourselves of the plane that we are about to return to again. So this week, as you can see from the title down below, we are reviewing In Praise of the Worldsoul by Jenna Helland. Now, if you were to look this up, or if you look in the description, which, by the way, if you would like to read these stories, the links are in the description, and we'll do our review in a minute. This story was in 3 parts. But, similar to last week, if you missed last week's video, which was, that story was in 2 parts, these were very short. And they were very short in my opinion, the best way. I think that the way that the first and second story were broken up was a little, like the first one ended kind of in a lackluster manner. So, but because they're so short and now all 3 exist, it was a lot easier for me to be like, okay, let's go read part 2. Whereas I don't know if I read part 1, if I would have been super gung-ho about like, oh my god, I need to know what happens in part 2 after having read part 1. Whereas that changed at the end of part 2, where I was like, holy crap, I want to know what happens in part 3. And again, all of it was one right after the other, so we now have the benefit of it not being 2012.
Right.
So we can go and do that. So if you're interested in checking out...
There's a lot of ways in which it not being 2012 is a good thing.
And other ways where it's not a good thing.
Yeah. That's also true. And
that, whatever you're thinking, that's totally what I meant. But anyway, so for my quick review at the top, because I'll obviously kick it over to Amy for her opinion as well, I wanted to say that I thought, once again, these were short. I thought they were short in a good way. I think that after part 1, you have to give parts 2 and 3 a try, because at the end of part 1, like, the story was okay, but it didn't grab my attention like I said. 2 and 3 definitely ramp it up, and I thought it was really good. I would recommend it if you have the time, which, as I said, is not much of a time commitment. But what did you think? You had a little bit of a different opinion, I believe.
I thought it was good. I'm not quite as excited about it as you are. You liked how short the stories were, and typically I'm all about a good short story. I think the fewer words that you can use to convey a story makes it the best story. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, I have to disagree. I have to say that I think they could have been a bit meatier.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
I don't know. I felt like the subject matter needed a bit more meat to it, I guess.
Well, and we'll talk about the ending, because I had feelings on the ending of part 3. Okay. But there are reasons for it, and again, we'll talk about it. But we'll go into the full review itself, but I will say, like I said at the beginning, if you are interested in checking out this story for yourself, check the description down below. There will be a link to those parts so that you can go read it for yourself, because, if you have the time and you're interested in hearing what we have to say, come let us know. So, as for parts 1, 2, and 3, part 1... for the full review itself, very quickly, and we always say, we review, we don't summarize, so go read the stories, but because these are from 2012, if you did read them back then and you just don't feel like going back and reading them again, but you need a refresher of something that happened 6 years ago, I don't blame you. Just a quick refresher. We'll talk about the story, and then we'll talk about what we thought of those individual parts. So we start with Selesnyans, specifically Selesnyan Wolf Riders, young children who are learning how to ride their wolf companions, care for their wolf companions. It was really cool.
Yeah.
You get to find out how this process works. I thought it was a little apropos, and we did not do this on purpose, although it worked out nicely. Today, day of filming, Wednesday, the day before this video goes live, we got the spoiler of the guild kits for Guilds of Ravnica, which includes some reprints from older sets, including, notably, Tolzimir Wolfblood for the Selesnyan Guild kit from the original Ravnica, in which they printed a Voja creature token, because Tolzimir Wolfblood makes a Voja creature token, legendary creature, etc. And everybody that I saw on Twitter was freaking out. They were like, oh my god, it's finally a Voja token, which is amazing. It's great. We have
it's beautiful.
Yes. We have a personal connection to Voja.
Yes.
And that card, a good friend of ours who is no longer with us, really enjoyed that card. And so seeing that card reprinted, but seeing that token meant a lot to us personally. So we encourage that you go take a look. We're definitely... I wasn't really, honestly, planning on buying the guild kits at all, although they looked really cool. I'll be buying a Selesnyan one now, for obvious reasons, but regardless, because of that, I thought it was really cool that this story started with Wolf Riders. Because if you were unaware, Tolzimir Wolfblood is riding a wolf. His name's Voja. So in this story, we don't have Tolzimir and Voja, but what we do have is, let me see, Ruzi, the Selesnyan, and Kuma, the wolf. And Ruzi was a hero of the Selesnyans. You come to find out that even though the god of the Selesnyans, or the thing that they worship, is known as the Worldsoul, he's not really there. Ruzi kind of more is interested in worshiping the work that the Selesnyans do and the things that come from that work, as opposed to the Worldsoul, which is a collective unconscious guiding toward unity and harmony, which is totally 100% Selesnya, I get it. But yeah, Ruzi's not there. Ruzi is all about caring about the work, and he's a hero and he's a fighter. And along with Kuma, he's teaching kids what to do, and he has an impressive feat at the beginning, but then is met by, when the kids leave, he's met by a dryad who he had kept waiting, so there's a little jaw-jacking back and forth, which is kind of funny. And he's told that he has to go to Rubblebelt, because in Rubblebelt, and he says he needs to go to Rubblebelt, and he goes, why don't you go to Rubblebelt? Oh, you want me to go get my sister. You come to find out he has a sister who had gone to Rubblebelt to build a new collective commune area there, near the Gruul, to try to make a companionship with the Gruul, because they share a love of nature, they being the Gruul and the Selesnyans. And turns out, once we meet her later on, it doesn't really work, but we'll get to that. But Ruzi is not...
she gave it the old college try.
Yeah, and look what it got her.
Yeah.
But so Ruzi goes, and they talk a lot about the fact that Wolf Riders tend to travel on the roofs of the city as opposed to on the streets of the city. Whatever. It's kind of like Batman, where he just drives on the roof sometimes and just doesn't care. And so now we have... That's the end of part one, which I thought, he kind of gets to the end of the last roof, and he's about to go onto the ground, and that's kind of where he's like, oh, I guess I have to go see my sister now, and that's where it ends. And it's like, if I knew who she was, maybe that would have been more of a compelling ending to part one, because like I said, I wasn't super like, oh my god, gotta find out part two so that we can meet Cecily. Although, and I will say, because we're just coming into these and reading them like this, if for some reason Cecily is somebody who was super important in original Ravnica and I just wasn't aware of it, please let me know in the comments down below. And correct me so that I can know, oh, that is why. So that we now, that would have been the intriguing pull for you to stay for the next week. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, next week begins, part two begins, and it's Cecily immediately. We get to see her in her home. We find out about what that home does. And we find out that, I think we found out at the end of part one as well, she had adopted a Gruul child. So even last week here on JaAR, we talked about a story, and they talked about taking children back from the Gruul clan. And now again we're hearing about a child taken from the Gruul, although in this case I think the child was like abandoned, and she found the child and took it for her own, or as her own, and then the Gruul found out about it and wanted it back. And it's like, that's not how that works, but okay.
Right. You abandoned it in the first place.
Yeah. So here we are.
It's just about pride at that point, I feel like.
I guess. Yeah, where it's like, well, it's ours. It should be raised by us, not by you Selesnyans. So, but we come to find out that because of that, there's intention. And Cecily decides that she wants to kind of be she's a prophet, we find out. She was mute. She then spoke, and in speaking, spoke basically as the Worldsoul, and spoke of the Worldsoul, and was essentially a prophet of the Worldsoul, as we understand prophets. And so in going to Rubblebelt, she really wanted to play that up and try to turn some of the Gruul over to the Selesnyan way of thinking and worship the Worldsoul as well, because, you know, unity and harmony and all that. So it's not just for Selesnyans anymore. Now it can be for the Gruul as well. Except, no it can't, because the Gruul are not interested and are pissed that she and her group are there.
Right.
And so when she expects a fight or an attack of some kind, so when the doors are blown off their hinges, or the gates are blown off their hinges, she's not as surprised, but she is surprised when it is not Gruul that show up, but Rakdos.
Right.
And not just any Rakdos, but Massacre Girl.
Right.
Which is an amazing name. So funny. I love it. So Massacre Girl shows up, and surprise, surprise, she massacres them. I don't think you saw that one coming.
No.
But she massacres them, including Cecily. And seemingly, well, no, I don't know if it saves her for the end, but then takes the blood of the people and writes the Rakdos blood symbol on the wall. And conveniently, that is where part 2 ends.
Right.
That is a cool ending, because you're like, what happens now? There's a part 3. What happens when I always forget his name. Ruzi. I tried to I was like, come on, remember. Ruzi.
Like, whose name?
What happens when Ruzi and Kuma get there? Like, what's going to happen? Well, part 3 begins with Ruzi and Kuma. Kuma smells the blood first and runs. And they get there very quickly because Kuma's a giant wolf, and that's how that works. And they get there, and the Rakdos, including Massacre Girl and her posse, are still there. And they get into a tussle. Massacre Girl leaves, but leaves a chain ogre, which was depicted by the art for Hellhole Flailer, which was always one of my favorite card names ever, because it's super metal.
I really like the art on that card.
That art was, the colors are fantastic. Go look it up if you don't remember, but it's just this huge ogre with chains flying around him, but
so cool.
But the colors in the background, the bright orange
against the black
in the background, is gorgeous. It's so beautiful. So yes, very good point. And we see Ruzi fight. I remembered his name. We see Ruzi fight the ogre and beat him, thanks to Kuma, because Ruzi is kind of in his own head about, like, I know my sister is among these bodies. I can't look right now because I'll be a mess.
Yeah.
And he even says, in his own head, thank God for Kuma's steady legs, because he's riding Kuma, because his legs were shaking, which I don't blame you, dude.
No.
That would, definitely a traumatic experience. So, yeah, I get it. To as much of a degree as I can understand it, I understand it. And so we get to see that fight, and then he decides he wants to go look for Massacre Girl because she left, and he now wants revenge for his sister. But first, he's going to dig a grave. And so he digs the graves, and he buries at least it was a mass grave, so he buried all of them. He buried everybody from that township that Cecily had created, and goes off, and as he's getting ready to leave, he hears crying. And we found out from meeting Cecily at the beginning of part 2 that the baby's name was Z.
Right.
Spelled Z-I, or Z-I for our non-US friends. And the baby was hidden under a table behind some boxes or something, I think is what they said. And so the baby was hidden from the Rakdos when they came to try and slaughter everyone or massacre them. And so...
She doesn't do that. None of them do.
So Ruzi takes Z under his proverbial wing and then realizes that it couldn't have been... Yeah, Ruzi knows of Massacre Girl. We find that out. And Ruzi knows that the Gruul would not have been the ones to hire Massacre Girl, despite the fact that Cecily completely, and he at the beginning, thought that it must have been the Gruul because she was in Rubble Belt, and so, you know, it had to be the Gruul. It wasn't.
Well, of course it wasn't. The baby wasn't taken.
Yeah. And so now he realizes that no, it was in fact someone from the city who had money enough to call for this massacre and pay the right people to do so. And so now we come to find out, oh, there's a little bit of a twist here and some intrigue, which I really enjoyed. And then you had the moment of his realization, and he says, well, maybe I can find someone else to seek out Massacre Girl for me. And so what he does is he goes to the Gruul encampment. And in going to the Gruul encampment, he says, let me explain to you what happened. My sister was at this, encampment, and I know she took your baby, and I know you want it back. And they're like, yeah, it belongs here, it's our blood. And he says, well, listen, speaking of blood, she's super dead. And she's in a grave, so hopefully that quells your bloodlust for her death, because she's dead. Congrats, you win.
And then, of course, a lovely twist, they didn't order the death.
Right. And again, he suspected it, and so then he says the thing that he sets his plan into motion. And he says, they also killed your baby.
Right. Which is a lie, of course.
Of course, because he has the baby.
Right.
But he says they killed your baby. And so the Gruul now...
See, it would be so convenient if the wolf was just a kangaroo. They could just hide the baby in the pocket.
I don't think Ravnica is the Australia-themed set.
Well,
I don't think we have one of those
that
yet.
one next.
I don't know if it'll be next. I would doubt it. But we'll find out. I wasn't shaking my head. Keep looking at the audience. So then that's kind of where it ends. Basically, he incites the Gruul to want to attack the Rakdos. The Rakdos are attacking the Selesnyans, and the Selesnyans are upset with the Gruul. Yeah. Well, the Selesnyans are going to be upset at the Rakdos, basically. Yeah. But it actually ends. The really kind of cute ending was he goes back into the city, he being Ruzi. Goes back into the city, finds Kuma, where he had sent Kuma off with the baby, and he finds them, I guess, on a rooftop somewhere. And the baby, Kuma is, protecting the baby with its paw, and the baby is, so clinging to Kuma's fur. That imagery was just adorable.
Yeah.
And so Ruzi lays down with the two of them and goes to sleep, and he basically says to Kuma, or says to Z, he says, I'm going to show you more of this beautiful city tomorrow.
And then we're going to destroy it.
We're going to bring it down. Yeah. So that's where you get the end, which I wrote this down word for word because this is how the story ends then. Rakdos against Selesnya, Gruul against Rakdos, Ruzi against them all. Now, through my research, and by research I mean cursory, quick glance look at the stories to come, it didn't look like that was a continuing through line. I think this was just used as a way of enticing you to want to buy Return to Ravnica as a set. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't have any information about what was going on back in September and October of 2012, except that Return to Ravnica was coming out around that time. So,
And now we're returning back to Ravnica around the same time of year.
yes, in the fall, which is why a lot of the things from Guilds of Ravnica are fall themed in terms of the setting, which is kind of cool. Very cool. So, so yeah, that is what we had this week. But in terms of a review, I mean, I think I said it all at the beginning, right? It ended a little oddly, but I get it that back then they were doing what I want them to do.
Right.
Now, again, I guess, which is sell your set with your stories. Sell your stories with your set. Make it a cyclical thing that people, make it symbiotic. I'm not going to get into a rant again. We've done that many, many times.
Right.
But
That's not this episode.
right. But I thought it worked really well. And I mean, there were cards spoiled in these stories. I think maybe only part 1 with like Common Bond. But no, maybe like parts 2 and 3 as well. I don't remember. But there was at least one card in Common Bond spoiled in part 1. Fine card, not amazing, not a rare or a mythic or anything, but a cool card. If you're going to spoil cards in your story, just do it that way. Mm-hmm. That's a really cool way of doing it because you make people want to stay. Make people interested. I don't know. For me, that's what I like to see. That's what I would want to see. And I think that they did a really good job of it here. And because otherwise, right, again, we're going back to Ravnica for Guilds of Ravnica. I don't expect to see Ruzi. I don't expect to see Z.
Right.
I don't expect to see any of these characters. If I do, I'll smile because there will be that little in-joke. But I definitely don't expect it. And if I don't get it, I'm not going to be mad about it. This was kind of a one-off story, and I think it did its job. And by one-off, I mean there were 3 parts. But I think it did its job. I think it did a good job at its job. But you thought that it needed more meat, you said earlier. So.
Yeah. Now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
I'm so sorry. And I noticed I cut you off when you were trying to say something too. I really apologize. If you think of it, let us know. Because this story was, and we're going to be doing one more next week. I'm going to look through, because this one kind of jumped out at me because it was 3 parts. And so if I can find another one that's in parts, which I don't think I saw, but if I can find another one that's in 3 parts, I'm going to, or in parts, I'll do that because it's a little bit easier. Otherwise, maybe we do 2, different stories
gotcha.
for Return to Ravnica. Because I think that'll be cool. And then we start with the Guilds of Ravnica stories right away after that. So, this is JaAR. We're trying to be here every week for you and trying to find content. Hopefully you enjoy this. Please give us feedback. Was this dumb? Were you interested? Were you not interested? Did you go read the story? Did you remember the story? Had you read it back in 2012? Let us know what you thought because that's really important to us. I'm trying to think of what we were talking about when you forgot what you were saying so that I could help you here. Sorry.
Oh, well.
So maybe next week. If Amy remembers in between now and then, watch this back. Amy always does. So
Yeah.
this is your homework. But when Amy watches this back, maybe she'll be able to remember and we can tell you next week. But
Or I'll just leave a comment.
that works too. So check the comments down below. Maybe it's already there.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can check the description for the links to these stories. I thought they were good. I think it's, if you want a quick read, a fun read, it's worth your time to read something back from 2012 and see if you think that the stories have gotten better, worse, the same since from 2012 until now, right? Moving from in-house writers to outside, to third party. And we'll see where we go with Guilds of Ravnica. So we will be back next week with all of you for that, for another episode of JaAR and another Return to Ravnica flashback review. Welcome to Throwback Thursday JaAR, I guess, or JaAR Throwback Thursday. I don't know. Either way, it's lame. But that's what I'm going with. So, thank you guys so much for watching. And coming here regardless of the fact that there has not been sponsored Vorthos content recently, to show off your...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Sorry, I didn't do enough of a lead up. I apologize. That's my fault on that one. So please let us know your thoughts, your opinions. Are you itching for more magic stories? Write it down in the comments below. I'm enjoying the fact
I've
that
been
we're...
scratching the whole time I've been sitting here. Must be the season changing. My skin's starting to get dry.
Yeah, or it's getting darker earlier, so mosquitoes are coming out sooner. Something like that. But yeah, I've actually been enjoying reading these stories as kind of a way to keep up with it. As a way to keep up with every week, let's read some magic stories. You know, I feel like if we were gone for weeks and just didn't do JaAR at all, and didn't read any stories, I feel like coming back would be kind of tough. Not because I wouldn't be interested in the storylines, because the cards look amazing, the set looks awesome. But yeah, speaking of the set, the last thing that I will say for today is, hopefully you're subscribed to this channel. And the reason I say that is not just because it helps us out, although it does. The subscribe button will come up here towards the end. But if you're subscribed to this channel, this Friday is pre-release, or technically Saturday and Sunday, but you know, midnight pre-release and all that. We, as we always are, will be at the midnight pre-release, and we will be opening product at midnight as soon as we can. After we get the product, we will be turning on the camera and opening some kits. And we are, because they are guild-based pre-release kits this time, we're opening 5 instead of 4. It's going to be a longer video, they always are. I hope you're willing to slog through it, but if you can't get out to a pre-release, I think your best bet is to come watch us open these kits. You'll get to see all the dice, you'll get to see all the cool promos that we get, the seeded packs for the different guilds. I'm super excited.
We don't just skip to the rares.
That is not what we do. Sorry, / you're welcome, because we're Vorthos, and we're going to talk about the cards, we're going to talk about the art, we're going to talk about the story spotlight. If I open an Assassin's Trophy, I'm going to be happy for multiple reasons. The fact that it's a story spotlight, and the fact that it's going to be super expensive. So hopefully you guys can join us for that. Like I said, stay tuned. We are on the East Coast of the US, so keep that in mind in terms of what time our midnight is. But you will see that video as soon after midnight as we can get it up and posted for you.
Right.
So, like I said, stay tuned. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of JaAR. Hopefully we will see you for the pre-release video this Friday on the channel. And like I said, you'll subscribe up here when it pops up if you would like to. This has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
We will see you guys hopefully soon. And in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.